What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are going to cover Volume 1 of J. Michael Straczynski's run on Spider-Man. Yes, you heard that right. We're going to cover JMS Volume 1 of his Spider-Man run, because when it came to JMS, he did a lot of good things for Spider-Man, but at the same time, he also did a lot of bad things for Spider-Man. Now, this will not be our first story we covered that was written by JMS when it comes to Spider-Man. Matter of fact, we covered a good amount of his stories already on this channel. So, for example, we covered Back in Black, we covered Sins Past, we also covered One More Day. And I want to say we covered some tie-ins to different events that he did as well when it came to the character of Spider-Man. But either way, I told myself we should cover his very first storyline, the first time he ever wrote a Spider-Man book. And the reason why? Because in this storyline, he gave us a new villain, a villain that would come somewhat popular in the Spider-Verse storyline. Yes, you know who that character is, and that character is Morlun. This is the first time Morlun ever appeared in Marvel Comics, but at the same time, this is JMS kind of changing the origin of Peter Parker. Not a lot, but a tad bit, to make his origin a tad bit more interesting. And you see what I mean as we go through this storyline. But the reason why I want to cover Volume 1 written by JMS is because we got Morlun in this story. This is his first appearance ever in Marvel Comics. So let's go. Now, I do want to mention a few things when it comes to the character of Peter Parker. And the reason why, because at this point in Marvel Comics, Peter Parker was actually married still to Mary Jane. Yes, you heard that right. He was still married to Mary Jane, but she does not appear in this book at all. And the reason why, because at this point in Marvel Comics, Peter Parker and Mary Jane, they were separated. And the reason why, because Marvel was really trying their best to get rid of her. Like, Marvel hated the character of Mary Jane, and they even hated her even more when she got married to Peter Parker. But they knew that fans would get very angry if they got rid of Mary Jane. But right now, her and Peter Parker, they are separated because Marvel is trying to remove her from Spider-Man comics. But JMS actually likes Peter Parker being married, and so he will begin the process of actually bringing her back into Spider-Man comics and actually healing the relationship between her and Peter Parker. But right now, we pick up with Peter Parker being Spider-Man and right now just hating his life, especially the idea that right now his wife does not want to be near him at all. And so you do have Peter Parker actually go to an abandoned building. And the reason why he went to that abandoned building is a way for him to kind of release his anger, because he's so mad with his current life right now, especially the idea that his wife is not around to be with him actually, that you actually have Peter Parker go to this abandoned building and begin the process of just destroying this building, just breaking down things in this building as a way to release his anger. Now, the funny thing is, though, this building was actually scheduled to be demolished. And so when Peter Parker leaves after spending hours and hours in there just attacking this building left and right after he leaves, you actually do have the construction crew appear, because again, this building was scheduled to be demolished, but then the entire building just comes down. And so with that being said, Peter Parker basically did their job for them, and honestly, the workers are kind of like, I guess we're now off for the rest of the day because our job is done now. Now, after you have Spider-Man basically do all that to that building, he then decides that he needs something to eat. And so he goes to one of the old diners that he used to go to when he was in school and hanging out with the different characters we saw in the early days of Spider-Man comics. So like Flash Thompson, Harry Osborn, and Gwen Stacy. Now, of course, we do get reminded that when Peter Parker was back in school and while he was basically going to different places around the school, he would always get picked on by Harry Osborn, Flash Thompson, and other characters. Now, we all know that later on, Harry Osborn actually stops being mean to Peter Parker and actually becomes friends with Peter Parker. But at first, Harry Osborn and Flash Thompson, they would constantly pick on Peter Parker over and over again. But then you have Peter Parker actually go back to his old high school, Midtown High. Now, this is very important because when Peter Parker walks by, he actually sees that his old high school has fallen apart to the point where now the school looks so unrecognizable to Peter Parker. He can't believe how bad the school looks now. But when he walks by, he does see another kid that reminds him of him when he was that age, being picked on by a bunch of bullies. Now, you do have Peter Parker basically step in to protect the kid that was being picked on, but then you have that kid just get upset at Peter Parker because to the kid, he's kind of like, even though you stop them now, that means they're going to come back later on and do something even worse now because they couldn't do anything to me at the moment. And so now when I see them next time, they're going to do something even worse to me. So thank you, you stranger man trying to protect me. Now, after that kid walks away from Peter Parker, that is when you have one of the teachers actually walk up to Peter Parker. Now, tell you right now, I hate this guy because this guy right here is basically telling Peter Parker it's the nerd's fault for being picked on. If the nerd just stands up for himself, the bullies will back off. Now, we all know that is not true, but of course to Peter Parker, he's kind of like us. That's not true. But to this random teacher, he's kind of like, yeah, you know, that nerd, if only he stands up for himself, these bullies will just leave him alone. And it's kind of like, no, dude, they will never stop until something dramatic happens. And that is when they'll actually stop. But after that moment, you then have Peter Parker go out as Spider-Man. And while he's out as Spider-Man, we do see Peter Parker basically stopping some thugs who are trying to break into a car. Now, once Peter Parker is able to deal with those thugs, that is the moment he's actually confronted by Ezekiel. This is the first appearance of Ezekiel in Marvel Comics. And this is huge because Ezekiel knows that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. On top of that, it does look like that Ezekiel does have the powers, the same powers as Peter Parker. And so with Ezekiel appearing right now in front of Peter Parker, this begins the process of basically JMS beginning to change the origin of Peter Parker. Not completely, but a tad bit. And what I mean is that you do have Ezekiel ask Peter Parker a set of questions that actually makes Peter Parker think about his past. And what I mean is that you do have Ezekiel ask Peter Parker a couple questions. The first one is, okay, Peter Parker, how in the world did you get your powers? And you have Peter Parker say, well, I got my powers from a spider bite. And then you have Ezekiel ask the second question, which was, okay, but did you actually study the spider? And you have Peter Parker say no, because the spider was squashed right after it bit me. And then you have Ezekiel ask Peter Parker a third and final question, which is this right here. Okay, with the spider biting you and basically giving you powers, what came first with the spider though? Did the spider already have the spider powers to give to you, or did it give you powers because it was radiated? What came first, radiation are the actual spider powers. And so that right there makes Peter Parker just stop in his tracks, because now it's kind of like, wait, did that spider actually have the ability to give someone spider powers? Or was it because the radiation that made the spider be able to give Peter Parker spider powers? And so right now it's Peter Parker wondering about his whole origin, about that spider that bit him so long ago. But then you have Ezekiel just leave to make Peter Parker wonder everything about his life even more now. But then you actually have JMS introduce his new villain, his new character that we're going to see a lot of times in future Spider-Man comics after this storyline, Morlun. Because we do jump over, I want to say in Germany, but we do jump over to Germany to a random boat, and we do see a random guy go inside the boat to talk to Morlun, because apparently you have this guy telling Morlun they are ready to go to their next location. But right before Morlun is able to talk to that guy, we actually see Morlun kill off some random superhero. Don't worry, this hero is not even important at all. Matter of fact, this was the hero's first and last appearance ever in Marvel Comics. But either way, we do see Morlun drain the life energy from that random superhero. And now Morlun is fully charged and ready to go. But then you have Morlun tell our random guy their next stop is to go to New York. And of course, we know who he's after next. And that, of course, is Spider-Man. But getting into the second chapter of this storyline, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker over the house of Aunt May. Now, of course, you do have Aunt May asking Peter Parker if he wants the last egg. And Peter Parker is not listening. And the reason why he's not listening is because right now he's thinking about what Ezekiel had asked him earlier in the last chapter. But then you have Aunt May ask her nephew one more time, which of course does catch his attention, and of course he does accept the last egg. Now, with that being said though, you do have Aunt May concerned about what Peter Parker was thinking about, and so she does ask her nephew what is on his mind. Now, you do have to remember, at this point in Marvel Comics, Aunt May has no idea that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and so with that being said, you do have Peter Parker actually lie to his aunt, because he can't tell his aunt that he was out as Spider-Man and he met some old man that has the same powers as he do. And so instead, he does tell his Aunt May about how he went by to his old high school, Midtown High. And you have Peter Parker tell Aunt May that his old high school has gotten worse. It's falling apart and it looks so bad. And that is the moment you have Aunt May tell Peter Parker that one of her friends told her that Midtown High is having a hard time keeping teachers, to the point that right now the school will basically accept anyone a job there as a teacher without even having the certification to be a teacher. And so it's her telling Peter Parker, maybe you should stop by and apply to be a teacher even though you don't have a teacher certification, because apparently the school is not asking for one. Now, this is the moment you really have JMS tell us the difference between Peter Parker and Ezekiel. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to Ezekiel, he really used his powers for personal gain. When it came to Peter Parker, he did the same thing, but then it led up to Uncle Ben getting shot. And so you have Peter Parker realize that he could not use his powers for personal gain. But when it came to Ezekiel, Ezekiel used his powers all the way to the point to build up an entire company for himself. And so with that, it's JMS saying that there is a difference between the two characters, Peter Parker and Ezekiel, where Peter Parker is more of a hero than Ezekiel is. Then we see Peter Parker right now traveling across the city as Spider-Man, because right now he's heading over to the building where he can turn in his application to be a teacher. But while he's traveling across the city, we do see Morlun having lunch. with his slave. Now, Morlun does see Spider-Man traveling across the city. And with Morlun seeing Spider-Man traveling across the city, you would think that Morlun would actually attack Spider-Man right now. But he doesn't. Instead, you have Morlun waiting for the right moment to actually attack Spider-Man. And so with that, you have Morlun use some kind of psychic attack to make Spider-Man's spider sense go crazy. Because remember, when it comes to Spider-Man in his spider sense warns him when danger is nearby. And so with Morlun using his psychic abilities to make Spider-Man's spider sense go crazy, you have Peter Parker to stop in his track and wondering what in the world just happened, because now he feels like danger is nearby. But when he looks around, he can't see danger. He can't see Morlun, because Morlun looks like a regular person who's right now eating lunch with another person. And so you have Peter Parker continue to travel across the city, but of course, now he's scared, because now he's wondering what in the world could possibly attack him down the road. And so you do have Peter Parker actually arrive at the building to turn in his application so that he can basically become a teacher at that school. But while they're looking over his application, that is the moment you do have a shooter walk into the school. Now, with this section of the book, I honestly do not want to cover this section at all. And the reason why, because in the real world right now, in the present day, we do have a lot of school shootings. And so I do not feel comfortable talking about a school shooting in a book in this video on my channel. And so we are going to skip over this section completely. And matter of fact, this section right here doesn't do anything for the story at all, because once Peter Parker is able to actually deal with the shooter, you do have Peter Parker declare that he will be the next science teacher at the school, because he feels like the school needs a change. The school needs to be protected. And so with that what happens in this section. And we are going to go ahead and skip over into the third chapter, because again, I do not want to cover any kind of school shooting on my channel at all anymore. But then we jump over to the third chapter. In the third chapter, it opens up with Peter Parker being Spider-Man, going after some random thug who had apparently kidnapped some random girl, and the police are having a hard time actually catching the guy, because right now you really have a police chase happening in the middle of the city. And so while this guy is trying to get away with the girl that he had kidnapped, you do have Spider-Man appear and being able to actually stop the guy and put him somewhere for the cops to come later to grab him and take him to jail. But after that moment, we actually pick up with Peter Parker being a teacher. Now, let me just say this right now. I love the idea of Peter Parker being a teacher. And the reason why, because when it came to Peter Parker in the early days of Stan Lee's writing of Spider-Man, he told us Peter Parker loves science. He loves science a lot. Now that love, it never went away. And matter of fact, the love for science had helped Peter Parker so many times throughout the years of him being Spider-Man. And so with that being said, I love the idea of seeing Peter Parker right now being a teacher and trying to teach the next generation of children who could possibly love science as much as he did. Now, after that moment right there, you do have the principal of the school come by to see how Peter Parker is doing on his first day as a teacher. Now, with that being said, you do have Peter Parker tell the principal that he's having a good old time. But that is the moment you do have the principal tell Peter Parker that one of his friends just gave the school $100,000. And for Peter Parker, he's kind of like, Who? Because none of my friends have that kind of money. So who in the world gave the school $100,000? And so when he walks into the office of the principal, of course, he comes to find out it was Ezekiel. Because remember, Ezekiel did use his powers for personal gain to give himself a company to use, to make himself rich. And so with that being said, you have Peter Parker kind of like, really, Ezekiel? You came to my school and gave my school some money? I know you want to talk to me, but there's better ways to talk to me. So, hey, Ezekiel, let's you and I go somewhere so we can finally have that conversation. Now, this is the moment you have Ezekiel explain the powers of Spider-Man, because I said JMS was going to change everything you know about Spider-Man to make things a tad bit more interesting, because for a long time, it was just Spider-Man got his powers from a random spider that was radiated. Instead, this is Ezekiel telling Peter Parker that his powers come from the spider totem, that across the world there are different kinds of animal totems, and people represent these animal totems. Matter of fact, this idea does get picked up when Shuri became the Black Panther, because she represents the panther totem. But for Peter Parker and Ezekiel, they represent the spider totem. And so the spider that bit Peter Parker basically picked him to be another representation of the spider totem. Now, Ezekiel got his powers a different way, but it's not fully explained in this book at all. And so we can move on from how he got his powers. But Ezekiel is telling Peter Parker that the spider already had the powers, but it got radiated, which of course made Peter Parker a radiated superhero. But it then tells Peter Parker that there are beings called inheritors who hunt down people who represent animal totems, warning him about Morlun, who is actually on his way to attack Spider-Man. Now, you do have Ezekiel actually take Peter Parker over to his company building, because inside the company building, Ezekiel had apparently built some kind of room that can actually protect Peter Parker, because with this room, it can actually hide Peter Parker from Morlun, so Morlun can never find Peter Parker. And Ezekiel's goal is to keep Peter Parker in this building for at least 2 weeks, because if he stays in this building for 2 weeks, then Morlun will go ahead and leave the city to look for a different target. But of course, you have Peter Parker say no, because if something so powerful is coming to New York, that person could possibly hurt innocent people. And Peter Parker is a hero who protects innocent people. On top of that, Peter Parker just became a teacher, and so he wants to make sure that he still has a job, and he loves the idea of teaching the next generation the idea to love science. And so, of course, he turns down Ezekiel's offer and he leaves the building. Now, later that night, you do have Peter Parker go out around town as Spider-Man, but while he's out there being Spider-Man, he does see a lot of commotion coming from a certain area in New York, and so he heads over there to see if anybody is hurt. But when he does arrive, he is instantly punched right in the face and flies across the street. And when he looks up, this is the moment he realized that what Ezekiel warned him about is about to happen right now, because this is Peter Parker meeting Morlun for the first time ever. Now, when we actually jump into the 4th chapter of this storyline, we do see Morlun fight against Spider-Man. Now, this fight, it does last for most of this chapter, but in this chapter, it's really more of Morlun just beating down on Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man is trying his best to try different things to actually stop Morlun, but Morlun is just too powerful, too fast. When Spider-Man tries to run away, Morlun is able to catch up to him very quickly. It's basically Morlun showing that When it comes to these two characters, Morlun is better than Spider-Man in almost every single aspect. And Spider-Man can't do anything at all. And so this is one of the worst beatdowns that Spider-Man has ever received by this point in Marvel Comics, because Morlun is just beating this man down left and right. This dude, Spider-Man, does not stand a chance at all. Now, with Peter Parker getting his butt kicked from Morlun, you do have Peter Parker just run away. And matter of fact, you do have Peter Parker try his best to change his appearance by looking like Peter Parker, but no longer looking like Spider-Man, hoping that it will basically keep Morlun away for now so that he can come back later with a new plan to actually stop Morlun. But here comes the big problem though. With Morlun finding Peter Parker, with Morlun fighting against Peter Parker, Morlun is able to track Peter Parker no matter what. If Peter Parker changed into his regular Peter Parker clothes, Morlun can still find him. If Peter Parker changes his face, his hair, whatever, Morlun can still find Peter Parker, because that is what Morlun does. He continues to chase you down until he's able to actually kill you off by draining off your life energy. And so with that being said, Morlun is right now just chasing after Peter Parker no matter what. Peter Parker looks like Peter Parker. He's no longer wearing his Spider-Man outfit, but Morlun was able to find him and continue the fight between the two of them. Now you do have Peter Parker switch back over to Spider-Man to fight against Morlun once again. Now, at the end of the 4th chapter, you do have Peter Parker able to bring an entire building down on Morlun to just slow him down for a brief moment. But you do have Spider-Man run away once again. Now, this time, Peter Parker actually runs over to Ezekiel to basically ask for his help, to stop Morlun. And so when we jump into the 5th chapter and you have Peter Parker asking for Ezekiel's help, you have Ezekiel actually tell Peter Parker, no, I cannot help you. Remember, I offer you this room as a way to hide from Morlun, because I knew he was somewhere in the city. But if you had used this room and stay hidden for at least 2 weeks, Morlun will lose track of you and just move on to a different target. But you turned that offer down and now Morlun found you. And here is another problem. Because Morlun had actually touched you, no matter where you go, no matter where you hide, Morlun will always find you. Do you understand that, Peter Parker? Now, you do have Peter tell Ezekiel he does understand, but now he's asking for Ezekiel's help to fight against Morlun. And you still have Ezekiel tell Peter Parker, no, I cannot help you. And the reason why I cannot help you is because I am trying to stay alive for myself, for my company, the people who work for my company. So no, Peter, you are on your own. And you have Peter Parker kind of like, you know what? I'm used to being on my own, but I guess I'll find a way to stop Morlun by myself. And of course, you do have Peter Parker go back to fight against Morlun. And the reason why, because he does hear a lot of innocent people screaming, because Morlun is wrecking the city as a way to bring Spider-Man out there to fight him again. And so right now, you do have Spider-Man go back to save the innocent people who were being attacked by Morlun. But again, Peter Parker realized that there is no way that he can actually stop Morlun. And so with that being said, you have Peter Parker realize that he could possibly die here. And with him possibly dying, he needs to say his goodbyes and prepare his death for the people he cares for the most. And so you do have Peter Parker actually go to a nearby payphone. And the reason why, because he calls up Midtown High. Because remember, he was just hired as a science teacher there. But when he calls them up, he's basically telling them that he will not be in today. That right now he needs a sub. Now, of course, the school does not believe him when he says that he is sick. But he does tell him, hey, I'm sick. I cannot come in today. You need a sub. All right, good. Bye. Later. And so you do have Spider-Man go back to fight against Morlun once again, because right now Morlun is hurting more innocent people. And so you do have Spider-Man begin the process of actually fighting against Morlun once again to only get his butt kicked once again. But with Spider-Man getting his butt kicked by Morlun, you do have Spider-Man leave once again, and this time he does call up the loved ones to basically say goodbye to them. And so the first person Peter Parker calls up is actually Mary Jane. And this makes sense because he wants to say goodbye to her. He still loves her. And you have to remember that at this point right now in Marvel Comics, him and Mary Jane, they are separated. But he still loves her. He still cares for her. But he does call her up. She does not answer. He does leave her a voicemail, which is him basically saying goodbye. And so then he calls up Aunt May. And this right here was even harder for him because calling up Aunt May, she actually answers. And you do have Peter Parker tell her that he loves her, which of course, by the way he's saying it in his voice, Aunt May is very concerned about her nephew, her son, basically. And so you do have Peter Parker say goodbye. And with him saying goodbye, it really scared Aunt May. But of course, right after Peter Parker hangs up that phone, Morlun is right there. And so we do see Morlun and Peter Parker fighting once again. And this fight, it only lasts for about 1 page. And the reason why, because you actually have Ezekiel appear. Ezekiel finally had a change of heart. And he realized that he should help out Peter Parker to fight against Morlun. And so matter of fact, you do have Peter Parker and Ezekiel fight together to get rid of Morlun. Now, of course, Morlun is still so powerful for both characters that even though there is a brief moment, it does look like our heroes could possibly win. You do have Morlun being able to grab Ezekiel, absorb some of his life energy, and you do have Peter Parker able to break it up, but Ezekiel does fall into the river. Peter Parker does go in there, but Peter Parker cannot find Ezekiel at all. And so now to Peter Parker, it does seem like maybe, just maybe, Morlun did kill Ezekiel by absorbing his life energy and possibly turning Ezekiel into dust, because Spider-Man cannot find the body of Ezekiel at all. But when Spider-Man comes back to the surface, Morlun is gone just for now, because with Morlun being able to absorb Ezekiel, it did kind of fill up the life energy that Morlun needed. And so Morlun is going to give Peter Parker a small break, but he will come back for Spider-Man very soon to finish the job. Now, you do have Peter Parker actually go back home, but when he does, he was able to collect a blood sample of Morlun. Now, this blood sample is going to help Peter Parker a lot. And the reason why, because once Peter Parker is able to kind of study the blood sample, he was able to realize that what Ezekiel said is true, that Morlun needs to go around killing off people who represent animal totems across the world. But the reason why Morlun does that, because he needs to stay alive. If Morlun does not do that, he will basically die. But here comes the big shocker though. When it comes to Peter Parker, he says that yes, he did get his powers from a spider, which means that Peter Parker does represent the spider totem. But here comes the big shocker. Because Spider-Man was bit by a spider that was radiated, Spider-Man is not pure energy for Morlun, meaning that if Morlun does absorb Spider-Man's energy, Morlun will die, because Spider-Man is full of radiation, something that can actually kill Morlun. And so right now, Spider-Man has a plan to actually stop Morlun. And what Spider-Man's big plan is to go to a nearby nuclear plant. And the reason why, because Peter Parker is going to inject himself with more radiation to make him more radiated, so that when Morlun comes to fight Peter Parker and actually tries to absorb his life energy, Morlun is going to absorb a lot of radiation instead. And so when we jump into the 6th chapter of this storyline, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker right now at the nuclear plant, where he's basically getting the injection ready to inject more radiation into his body. But while he's doing that right there, you do have Morlun arriving at the nuclear plant. Because remember, with Morlun have touched Peter Parker earlier in the storyline, he's now able to track Peter Parker no matter where Peter Parker goes to. And so with Peter Parker being here at the nuclear plant, you have Morlun being able to arrive at the nuclear plant by tracking down Peter Parker. But when Morlun walks into the nuclear plant, he does find Spider-Man passed out. And the reason why, because Spider-Man had already injected himself with more radiation. And so now for Morlun, it seems like an easy target. He can just go ahead and kill off Spider-Man and absorb his life energy. But like Peter Parker said earlier, he is not pure energy, because even though he was bit by a spider to represent the spider totem of the Marvel world, but he also got bitten by a spider that was radiated. And so Peter Parker's body is full of radiation. And with that second injection of radiation, his body is now even pumping out more radiation, to the point that when Morlun actually begins the process of absorbing the life energy of Peter Parker, it makes Morlun sick. It begins to hurt him because radiation actually hurts Morlun. And so with that being said, Spider-Man now has the edge over Morlun, because Morlun can no longer absorb Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is not pure. And so with that, Morlun is just an easy target for Spider-Man now, because with that radiation in Morlun's body, his body begins to break down. And so while you have Spider-Man and Morlun fight for a few pages, it does end with Morlun getting shot. Now, Morlun was not shot by Spider-Man. Matter of fact, Morlun was shot by his own slave. Remember, Morlun had this random guy following him around and doing every single thing Morlun had asked him to do. But I guess this guy got so tired of being Morlun's slave that he shot Morlun twice in the chest to basically kill off Morlun. And that is the death of Morlun. And you actually have Spider-Man say, you know what? I'll let you go for now because I know how badly he treated you. But if I see you again, I'm going to hurt you because I do not like killers at all. And so you do have Spider-Man being able to leave with the... Now, the story does begin to wind down because you do have Spider-Man actually go back over to the company building that used to belong to Ezekiel to see that maybe Ezekiel has showed up, or maybe someone knows what happened to him. Maybe someone found his dead body. But when he arrives at the company building, well, he comes to find out the company building is completely empty. Apparently the company just moved out of nowhere. And so you have Spider-Man wonder, why in the world did the company just disappear? But then he finds a spider on the wall. And of course, it is a fake spider that was stuck onto the wall. But when he goes to grab it, he does see a lot of footprints. And that tells Spider-Man that Ezekiel is not dead. That matter of fact, Ezekiel is alive and well. And with Ezekiel being alive, that means we could possibly see him again down the road. So to go ahead and wrap up today's video, you do have Spider-Man actually arrive back home to his apartment. And his main goal right now is to just relax, because this dude has gone through a lot. And I mean, he has gone through a lot fighting against Morlun. But right after he takes off his Spider-Man outfit and he passes out, well, you do have Aunt May walk into his apartment. And when she does go into his room and she does find his tattered Spider-Man outfit. And this tells Aunt May that her nephew, Peter Parker, is Spider-Man. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.